All right, here's a few news articles while you wait for the official time to start. I'm interested in this one because, as you know, if you're taking my 128, I use a lot of real apps in my class, and I've been giving them 30 days, although in fact lately I've been using ones that I told 5 years ago. But anyway, Google Project Zero gives them 120 days, and they used to be extremely ruthless about this, even to the extent that when they found Microsoft Windows vulnerabilities that were really bad, and they told Microsoft and put them on their blog with scheduled release, and then Microsoft said, will you please give us like 2 more days so we can hit patch Tuesday, they would say no. And then they would create a situation where they dumped a unpatchable vulnerability that affected Windows for a while. Now they have changed their mind. They've given everybody an extra 30 days. So 120 days plus 30 if there's no patch available by then, which is pretty generous, or 90 days plus 30. So that's interesting. I may have to modify my policies to try to keep up with that. I just try to meet the standards of the industry just to avoid criticism. Although nothing I find is as important as the stuff they find on a 0 day. But this is the responsible disclosure thing. If you just dump them without telling the manufacturer of the software at all, some people yell at you and say you're being irresponsible, so some delay is recommended. I'm surprised you can do this. There is an iOS VPN app that will mislead you about the free trial and then charge you like $10 a week, which is an outrageous price for a VPN. And it reminds me, there was an app about 10 years ago that cost something like $1,000, and they just said it just shows off that you're rich enough you can burn $1,000. And I think Apple actually took that one out of the store. So there is some level of just egregious, outrageous, burdensome pricing that Apple will take action on, but apparently they haven't taken action on this one yet. This one I thought was pretty interesting, and it seems to me very logical that the reason people take recreational drugs like marijuana and mushrooms and stuff is because they find it makes them feel better, I would think. I don't think it's just that they're all crazy, insane drug addicts, I think. Anyway, and it always seemed very logical to me that rather than the clinically prescribed antidepressants, it would seem like the common street drugs are ones which have an enormous user base that has found that this makes you feel better, and that's what they're finding here. They're finding that magic mushrooms are as effective as antidepressants, and I wonder if they have lesser side effects. So, this is the problem with the Schedule 1 drugs, that you can't even do research on them. It would seem to me that they are obvious candidates for beneficial effects, since some enormous number of people are using them illegally, and obviously most of them are not experiencing terrible effects. It seems like they ought to be researched for their possible medical benefits. So Ivanka Trump got the vaccine, and then she published on Twitter a picture of her taking the vaccine, and now everybody's screaming and yelling. The right-wingers are complaining that she's betrayed them by getting the vaccine because they see it as politically necessary to not get the vaccine, and some people on the left are saying, why didn't you do that months ago? But anyway, it's an interesting step forward. Trump actually said at CPAC that he got the vaccine and people should get the vaccine, but he certainly didn't push it very much, because it is the case that it will offend most of the Trump base. They've got some very strong attachment to pretending that COVID doesn't matter. So they've made monkey human embryos. They didn't live very long. They just lived long enough to multiply to a few cells and then die. And they're saying this is the kind of stuff you see in science fiction movies. But of course, we now have like spiders that can make human insulin and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of animals that have some human cells. And you could do things like grow organs for transplant and make drugs and stuff. But they normally use pigs and such. Using monkeys hits different ethical rules. But anyway, it's a possibility, and they've done it. Then people are saying maybe you shouldn't have done it. We'll see where it all goes. Slim Jim has attached itself to Dogecoin after Elon Musk attached himself to Ethereum and Dogecoin, and this caused Doge to surge way up. And that's the point. When you have a completely speculative, foamy asset here that has no actual value, it's just basically like a song or a movie. It's just how popular it is right now. Or even like a silly thing, like a TikTok video, something that has almost no obvious value, but just might happen to be a meme that's hot for a while. And Here you have a financial instrument that can sail up. So it went up by something like 71% in one day. And that's what risky assets have always done. Risk is the variation over the mean. So many of my students, many people are expressing a lot more interest in cryptocurrencies and NFTs now because they're making so much money. And, I think about it. I hear all this news, and a lot of serious people like Scott Galloway seem to be getting into them. And I don't want to do it. And the reason I'm not going to do it is because I don't want to live the life of a gambler. And I don't recommend living the life of a gambler. Once you start doing this, you get sucked into spending your life investing, watching things go up and down, freaking out, and getting money from being a professional gambler. And that is one possible life if you want it. But what I recommend is a much safer, calmer way to deal with this, which is to become a programmer, helping to program this stuff. Then you are not like a gold miner going out there digging, trying to find treasure. You're like the guy that sells shovels to the gold miner, which is a much simpler, more placid existence, which is what I prefer. I'd rather just have a normal job and a normal amount of money and not have all the stress and chaos of being a high-stakes gambler, watching my money go up and down. So we'll teach cryptography again next semester, and we will program cryptocurrencies and see them go. But we're not going to be launching public coins to invest in. But I think a lot of people do start companies like Coinbase that are making cryptocurrencies and selling them and trading them, and you can tap into some of that vast wealth in a less crazy way by just being a programmer or security engineer helping them run the technology. And I think that's a lot better because I think all these prices are just completely crazy. This is just a bubble like the tulip mania, something selling for 1,000 times what it's worth, which is just a temporary rush of enthusiasm. And you don't want to be directly involved in that madness, I would think. Not if you're the kind of person that would go to college and get a degree and try to follow a normal life. If you want to live the life of a gambler, most of those people are off doing high-risk things already, I would think. Anyway, Ted Cruz says he's no longer going to wear a mask. Like me, he's vaccinated. I still wear a mask when I go out, although I actually have some sympathy with this. It seems to me like the evidence is in. If you get a vaccination, you cannot get the disease for all practical purposes, and you cannot spread the disease. So we all just ought to get the vaccine, and then we don't have to wear a mask, and we can go back to normal life. And I do have some sympathy with all the Republicans being very frustrated by this nonsense, saying, look, once everybody's had the vaccine, just forget it. Let's just open up. I want to open up the college. I think we should meet face-to-face for DEF CON and everything. But it's not happening as fast as I would do it, or as fast as Ted would do it. But, I'm not angry enough to go charging into some place where other people are working without a mask when they don't want it. That's just rude, although I think medically his position is right. Sort of ethically it's questionable. Anyway, speaking of that, there's Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson keeps attacking other journalists on his show, and then they get attacked by the MAGA army, death threats and people threatening their children and stuff. And I don't think he's been sued. Anyway, it's definitely a rotten bullying thing to do. You might not get the disease, but you can absolutely spread the virus after vaccination. I don't think that's absolute at all. I've seen articles saying that exactly the opposite. But anyway, once you have the vaccine, you can't carry it. I have seen articles saying exactly that once you have the vaccine, you can't carry it or transmit it anymore. But everybody else is acting like that is still gravely in doubt. So maybe it is. I highly doubt it, though. Anyway, it's security is all about compliance. I've got a link to that one if you like. I've got an article that says that you can't spread it anymore. They were having this argument just a couple of days ago. Let me see if I can find it. Yep, here's one. And somebody's put another one here. Let's see what this one says. You have brief rationale and evidence for public health recommendations. Okay. A growing body of evidence suggests that fully vaccinated people are less likely to have asymptomatic infection and potentially less likely to transmit it to others. Yeah, I think this is the same thing. This is what the CDC says, and they would like to wait forever. Yeah, so I think there's a study that indicates that you can't spread it, but the CDC has not yet decided that it's sure enough. Yeah. Anyway, that's an interesting one. I'll add to my links. So, all right, let's see. And it's now time to start anyway, so I'm going to skip the rest of these news articles, and we'll go down to the official stuff. All right. So, oh, by the way, there's a whole lot of upcoming events. 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, Chair Wheeler's talking about cyber crimes in London, and you can tune in for free. And then there's SOC audits and Kubernetes security, 2 things this Saturday that also look very good. And then a Tech Talk on Tuesday from ISSA. So these are all worth extra credit, and I highly recommend tuning in to some or all of them. Anyway, so we're here with 125, and the plan today, if anybody wants to give an early presentation, let me know, and I'll make a list. You get extra points by giving your presentation today instead of next week. But before that, I'm going to talk about Chapter 6, which is really short, and we'll do the first little bit of Chapter 7 then. My early presentation is uploaded. Okay, if you just uploaded it, we can just watch it there if you don't want to do it here. If anybody wants to do it in class, let me know. You can also just put a video on the Canvas site, and we can view it there. If you want to do it here, though, it often simulates interesting discussion. Okay, good. So G-Bob, I'll put you on the list, and let me know if anybody else wants to. Early. The presentations were excellent before, and the discussion was very good. So doing it in class can often lead to a lot of interesting stuff. Yeah, if you go to any of these things, I'd say just send an email or a message in Canvas and let us know that you did it. Someone else, Dice Creation. Okay, Dice is another person with an easy, with an early presentation. Okay. And Dodan. Okay, good. 3 people. Good. Fair enough. All right. I think I see 3. Good, and that would be good. And they're only 4 minutes, so I think that'd be no problem. All right, so let's start with these slides for Chapter 6, which should be here. There we go. All right. So assessment and testing. All right, so if you want to check your access control, then, assessing is measuring how well you have achieved your goals. Penetration tests are when you pay hackers to hack into your stuff and then tell you how they got in and recommend how to stop it, so they can come in through the phone or the wireless. They can physically pick the locks and climb over the walls and get in the building, or come over the internet, or any combination of these things. They work under rules of engagement. And they often include social engineering, which is a very prominent weakness that people are taking much more seriously, which is just tricking your employees into doing something wrong, like letting somebody in a building or giving them a password or something. And so sometimes they operate with no knowledge from a company. Sometimes you give them some knowledge. If you don't tell them things, they will just research you on the internet and usually find out all kinds of things. And that's another kind of weakness you might learn about, is that your publicly accessible web pages are giving out more information than you want. So there are tools people use to do automated attacks like Metasploit, and there's a general pen testing methodology, and it's gradually getting more and more organized and planned. You have a planning stage. You do a lot of reconnaissance, exploring your company on the internet and with other public resources, and then you scan things, find vulnerabilities, exploit them, and then you have to give a report explaining to your company what you did and what recommendations you give them to improve their security. So you have to be, this is all under a non-disclosure agreement, of course. You can't be publishing the results you find. That would defeat the whole point of the thing. It's a confidential process, just like a medical exam is confidential for very much the same reason. So you can do vulnerability scanning with automatic tools. That should be part of a pen test, although tools are not very good. They often report vulnerabilities that are not real, and they very often report vulnerabilities that, while technically present, do not have any real business impact, and they often miss important vulnerabilities. So you really have to do manual testing along with it to find out how important these vulnerabilities are and to pick up ones that the scanner misses. The scanner is just one of your tools. Now, so that's a pen test. Now, a security audit is a different thing where you just have a long list of things that you check for, more like a financial audit. Not like a pen test is more creative, where you try many tricks and try to find some way in. A security audit is where you just go down a list, like a PCI DSS list that says your data must be encrypted at rest, encrypted in motion, passwords can't be shared, doors have to be locked, this and this and this. And you just go down this long list of things and make sure that they are all being done. And there's a security assessment is another way to go. And you check many things, your policies, your administrative controls, your change management, your documentation of previous pen tests and security audits. So you can have an internal audit. I mean, we used to do this all the time when I worked at an escrow agency. We had very good processes of doing internal financial audits. So when our external clients came to audit us, they could just look, we had it all ready to go. Here's what we did. You just need to review what we did and see that we did it right. And that's what you do when you're serious about really controlling things, is you have an internal audit yourself to make sure you're doing the right thing. And then you have external audits by outside people just verifying that you did the things right. So one thing is log reviews. All your devices, your web servers and your firewalls and everything have logs in your operating systems, and you should be aggregating all these logs and monitoring them for threats and monitoring them for compliance and to detect violations of security policy. There's no self-certifying. Yes, there absolutely is. If you have a low number of credit card payments, for example, I think it's less than 10,000 transactions a year or something, I'm not quite sure what the number is, then in fact, all you do is self-certify. They just send you a list and you just say, yes, we did this and this. We have a firewall, we encrypt stuff, and they don't check it externally. So there absolutely is stuff that is just like the honor system, really. They only bother to have an external audit if you have a larger number of transactions, just because that's an expensive process. Anyway, so you'll have a centralized place where all these logs go. Otherwise, it would be very burdensome to examine them all. This is what Splunk does. You forward all things to a single server or single cluster of servers, and then you have an engine to search it. The original way to do this in Unix was syslog, which would transmit data over UDP, and every proprietary solution has some way to forward data to a central location. And then you often retain the logs as proof of things, and so you can examine the past. For example, if you find some kind of breach or some kind of infection, then you might want to look in the past to see the things that led up to this, or how long has this malware been around, things like that. All right, and to test your software. You have to have some way to detect the errors your programmers make, so reviewing the source code is important, should be part of quality control. You can do static analysis, which is examining the source code without running it, and you can do dynamic analysis, which is running the program and watching how it behaves. Pair programming is one common technique where your programmers work in pairs so that they can hopefully spot each other's mistakes early in the development process. So static testing, the code is not running, so you can run scanners on the source code and look at warnings and such. Yeah, the solar winds caused everyone to look at log retention. Yes, absolutely. And before that, the one in 2014 that affected all the Unix servers, all their HTTPS servers, that one really bothered people because it used the heartbeat, and the heartbeat did not make a log entry. So everybody had to go to their boss and say, boss, our public key has been blowing in the wind for 2 years. Anybody could have stolen it, and we will never know whether that happened or not. And by the way, how about that raise? That's really nasty. It was an attack that would not even hit the logs. But anyway, so similar thing, your static and dynamic testing. So one thing you can do is compare the customer requirements to your testing plan. This is something some customers might do to make sure that you run certain tests. And you can simulate business activities to reproduce some semblance of normal activity to make sure that your apps can actually handle the load. And there's various ways to test things. You can test one component to make sure that one component works. You can install it and make sure it works as first operation. You can test it with integration to make sure that it works properly with other ones. Yeah, this is all related to fuzzing, and fuzzing will come up later. Fuzzing is a test where you send random data in to see if it crashes. But these are all various different types of tests. So regression testing is testing with sort of standard tests. You'll find this on a lot of GitHub pages. Here's the tests you should run to make sure it's meeting the standards, to make sure that it still has the recommended functionality after patches. Acceptance testing will test to make sure that it meets whatever the standards of your client are, or by a customer, user acceptance testing. And here's fuzzing, where you send deliberately malformed data. The original way it was done was you had a 56K modem that you'd use during a lightning storm. That's how they discovered it. And then they did it in software, where you introduce random bit errors in the data. And so that's a way to find, this did find a whole lot of flaws. The most common thing you do is just send in malformed data until the program crashes. There are more complicated ones like peach fuzzing, where you actually modify the source code to include hooks. All right, and so there's a lot of different kind of testing. One big issue of fuzz testing, for example, is that if you do send in random input, you can check to see how much of the actual code you have touched with that modified input, and it turns out usually to be a very small amount of code, like 5%, that you're actually testing. So trying to make sure that you test all the code would be not just a random process, but somehow making sure that you hit all the if statements the right way to penetrate more of the code. And that's tough. You try to get all unique inputs. So varying two parameters together is often part of that. And in more deep fuzzing, you modify the source code to make sure that you can test it all. And then there's a misuse case, like threat modeling, where you try to model an adversary attacking. This is becoming pretty common. I've seen this at the GRIM convention. A lot of people are now making the attack framework based simulators that will try to have an automated attack that simulates all the stages of a real advanced persistent threat to test all your defenses, which is getting more and more sophisticated at this threat modeling, which is something Microsoft has pushed a lot. And so this is what I was talking about. Test coverage is how much of your code is actually being tested. And yeah, this is being recorded. All these things get recorded and posted at my website, samsclass.info. Anyway, and it's on YouTube too. So that's the point. This is how you determine whether your test actually tests all the code, and it is actually not easy at all to make sure that your test hits all the code. And so you get your results, that then improving security is much more difficult. It is, if you are doing exploit development and you find a crash, turning it into a working exploit is quite complicated, and turning it into a decision of how to modify the code to stop it can also be quite complicated, although you can cheat and go the easy way and just put it in your firewall. So you stop that kind of traffic from coming in. That is an easy way to mitigate a vulnerability you found without really fixing your underlying code, but it's not as safe, of course, because there might be a way to sneak past that rule. And that's why people like web application firewalls. They're not as strong a defense, but they're much easier to set up, and they're of course designed to stop the standard tests, so you will meet the compliance requirements easily with that. But it doesn't really fix your underlying security as well as actually understanding and fixing your code. So let's take a look at the Kahoot for this chapter 6. And that is here. And 125, chapter 6. All right. Yeah, somebody's asking if this is recorded. I can put this in the chat while people are joining that. If people have ended up here without officially being in the course, that's fine. You will find all the videos on this page here. I'll put it in the chat. looks like that's it. All right, so how do you assure HIPAA compliance? Yep, you have an audit. Just checking to make sure you have done all the things you're supposed to do. All right. What happens on UDP 514? All right, that's syslog. All right, after you update software, what do you do? Regression test makes sure that the essential functions still work as they should. And what does Microsoft do in their STL? Yeah, they do threat modeling. And by the way, Microsoft did not used to do fuzzing right up through the development of Windows Vista. And a hacker named Laurent Gaffey twice found 0 days in Vista within 10 minutes of fuzzing. And that's what finally convinced Microsoft to add fuzz testing to their tests. Anyway. All right, A1 for N. Probably Alan, I guess. All right. And this one I know. And, okay, that's a name that looks pretty real. All right, good. So let's take a look at the next one. Just going to do a little bit of the next chapter because it's long, and that way we won't have all of it to do next time. Let's see. 6 we're done with. And here's 7. All right, security operations. So, you have administrative personnel controls. These are not technical rules. These are policies. And so least privilege is a general principle where people get only enough permission to do their job and not enough permission to do extra things they don't have to do that will get them in trouble. Need to know, making sure people don't have information that they don't need. And separation of duties is where 2 people have to work together to accomplish something. This was, of course, my case when I worked at an escrow agency. You could not send out any money to anybody without preparing it and then having a second person examine it and sign off on it before the money would go out, because that's an important activity. And that way, it prevents mistakes, and it also prevents embezzling on the job. I couldn't have taken money and paid it to myself because that second audit would notice that I'm sending the money the wrong place. You would have to have at least 2 people working together in a conspiracy to defeat a control that has separation of duties. And another similar thing is rotation of duties, where you don't let people stay in the same job forever, and you don't let them never take vacations. If people won't move and they won't take vacations, they might just be a workaholic, but it's also possible that they are doing something dishonest and they're covering it up. And so having someone else take over their job periodically for one of these reasons is another way to mitigate fraud. The non-disclosure agreements we talked about, very important. You learn a lot of things on the job that are just not public information, and you shouldn't be blabbing about them. And background checks are surprisingly omitted. Something like 3/4 of employees never really go through a simple background check where they even call your references in schools to see if you really went there, or if they fired you from your last job for stealing or something. Even the very simple background check would be a lot better than what most people do, which is why something like 3/4 of resumes have lies on them, because people don't even verify what's on the resume. but of course they should, and they would save themselves a lot of grief if they just did even a cursory examination to see if this person is a known bad actor. Another more difficult issue is that you have high privilege accounts like system administrators and domain administrators. They can be doing things on your network that are not in accordance with security policy, and it might be very hard to find them. And there's been for decades stories of people running second businesses at work and illegal file sharing from work and distributing pornography from work servers and all these things. And you're not supposed to allow this to happen, so you have to have someone audit the activities of your high privileged people to see if they are doing things they shouldn't be doing. All right, and then there's forensics, which is examining something after when you discover that something is happening that shouldn't be happening, like an infection or some kind of intrusion or violation of policy. Then you want to gather the evidence from the systems. So you can make images of hard drives or RAM or run scripts to fetch registry keys and so on. And there are techniques to hide what you're doing, making forensics difficult. You can put malware in places where it's harder to find. These days, in incident response, it's very important to catch RAM. In the old days, you would just go with the hard drive, but now an awful lot of important information is in live processes running in RAM, and you have to capture it. That should be an external person. Well, again, it could be an internal or an external person. Large companies have their own forensic team, and they do internal investigations. You can do it either way. But of course, what you would most like to have is you'd like to have an internal incident response team that is so good that you can detect problems and analyze it yourself and fix it and avoid it turning into a public scandal. You know, if you're really efficient, you would detect that, say, one of your employees is running unauthorized software or embezzling money, and then you figure it out yourself, and then you can just quietly fire them, and you don't have to like make a public statement or have a lawsuit or anything or a prison sentence. You can avoid all that damage to the company. So, but if it does turn out to be a breach of customer data, then you have to report it. You know, that's why. And of course, if, as is extremely common, you don't detect it, and then the FBI comes to you and says, here, this other company has your data, somebody stole your data, then of course you're dealing with external people. So, you know, it's the same thing. It's nothing particular about technology there, you know. Anyway, so you identify the potential evidence, then you acquire the evidence and make a archived copy of it so you know it, and then you analyze it and produce a report saying, I analyzed this system and I determined whether these bad things are happening or not. So live capture is where you run some kind of script on a system and it queries information like a list of all the files, list of the registry keys, login logs of who's been authenticating onto it and such. This is the most common thing you do in incident response, because getting a whole image of a 500 gigabyte hard drive is far too much data. You run a script to get just the important information. You can make binary images of all the storage devices, and that's what you might do in a criminal investigation like police forensics, but you end up with far too much data there, and it's expensive to analyze, so you certainly don't want to do this casual. You only do this in selected machines where it's really worth getting all that. If you make a complete binary image of every bit stored on a storage medium, like a hard drive, then you get not only the active data, which is files in use, you get files that have been deleted. And that's, of course, very useful because the perpetrators will often delete files thinking they're hiding the evidence. All right. So allocated space is normal files. This is clusters that contain data which is connected to a file name and owned by somebody and has a creation date because that data is still in use. Then you have deleted files, and you have little bits of data stuck in fragments in between the files called slack space. And then you have bad blocks, which are blocks that have data which has been determined to be corrupt, but it's still there, and you can often get some information out of there. These are in the order of sort of decreasing value. The live files are still completely intact, and you even know who owns them and have a date on them. The deleted files are often useful, and the rest of this stuff gets less and less useful. It's just fragments of files. But in principle, it could contain something of value. Sometimes it depends on how bad they want that person. Of course, yeah. And how vulnerable is NVMe RAM? Well, I don't know. I'm not aware of significant RAM vulnerabilities except the cosmic rays, flip bits, and there's an attack called Rowhammer that causes data to leak from one RAM location to another, but that's really quite exotic. Non-volatile memory RAM. Perhaps that's what you mean. If you're talking about, flash drives and USB sticks, they're basically like hard drives. The only thing about them is they're very hard to erase. But anyway, if you have more information about that question, I might be able to say something more. Anyway, so to make a complete binary backup of a hard drive, you can just use DD on Linux, or you can use Norton Ghost, or FTK Imager, or Encase, or many other tools that will just run a program to make a complete copy of RAM or a hard drive, getting every bit. And so network forensics is where you monitor the network traffic, and you can record whole packet captures and then reconstruct objects that are sent over the network and figure out what people are doing. Network intrusion detection is an automated network forensics, and then you can have records of network traffic and then analyze them later. This is where I was on a team that won the black badge at DEF CON in network forensics, so that was fun. There's a whole village, the packet hacking village at DEF CON, just about network forensics that I'm often hanging out in. Anyway, all these things are on the network. These days, it's much harder and less likely to work because more and more of the network traffic is encrypted. If it's all encrypted properly with a modern version of HTTPS, you really can't learn much from the network traffic. But there's still an awful lot of traffic on networks that is not encrypted. Anyway, so once you have a big binary file, like the image of a whole hard drive, then you have to analyze it, and this is what tools like Encase and FTK help you with. And if you get a malware sample, then you have to reverse engineer the malware and figure out how it works, and that's we got classes in that here, malware analysis and exploit development, and it's really quite technical, going down to the binary code. Quite a demanding technical activity, but there's a lot of books and training classes that prepare you for that, certifications and stuff. Then you can look at the embedded devices, like phones and all the other smart devices in your home, SSDs, the GPS in your car, and so on. Everything has got a little computer in it these days, and all of them are recording what you do, and you can analyze those things and find data in there, like cars are totally recording where you go and how long you were there and tracking it with your GPS, and they can retrieve that from inside your car these days. Another related activity to forensics, which usually is investigating a crime, is EDiscovery. If you get sued by somebody, then they will have a discovery request saying you must get everything for the last 3 years that had to do with your dealings with this company or on this topic. And so you now have to search through all your backup tapes and everything to find every Word document, every spreadsheet, every email, everything involved. And if you don't do a good enough job in discovery, the court will often just make a summary judgment against you, saying you're not cooperating, so you lose. So it's real important, and that's a whole field closely related to forensics, EDiscovery. I've got some students that work in this full-time in San Francisco now. It's quite a job. It's very much like forensic investigation if you're not prepared for it. And if you're a big company and you get used to just a steady stream of lawsuits, then you proactively install indexing software on all your networks and everything so that you have records with keywords that make it easy to retrieve all this stuff. This is part of why people were so mad at Hillary Clinton for using an unofficial email server. Because if you don't use the official company email server, then your emails are not properly indexed and put in this record, and then when there's a need to archive it for legal compliance, it's not there. So it is not good if you're doing company business not on the company network, not on the company servers. Then you won't be able to find it when it's time to make a report of what happened. Anyway, all right. And so incident response isn't discovery, the process of either side having to produce. Yes. Yeah, but no, discovery, if you sue somebody, you have a discovery request, and now they have to turn over all their papers. This happened, for example, with Google and Oracle. Oracle sued Google for billions of dollars saying you used Java in violation of our software license agreement, and you therefore owe us licensing fees for the Java that you put in Android. And they submitted a request to Google, and Google, their EDiscovery company, messed up. They searched through all their servers, and they found some emails that had one of those notices on the email that say this email is privileged lawyer-client communication, because they had internal documents that said a person at Google in the early days of Android had in fact sent a memo to the boss saying, I don't think we should use Java because Java is proprietary to Sun and we would have to pay them fees. And that was marked attorney-client privilege, so it was exempt from discovery. But somebody forwarded that email inside Google, and they cut off that little message. And a proper EDiscovery company would have not reported it, because you don't have to have that message on every copy of the email. If it's on even one copy of the email, then you do not need to produce it in discovery. But they screwed up and handed it over to Sun. So Sun had a copy of what they thought was the smoking gun, proving that Google knew they were breaking the license of Java, and that made years and billions of dollars of lawsuits that was just resolved last week at the Supreme Court. But that's discovery. Discovery is in response to a court summons. You have to hand them all the evidence, even the evidence that might prove that what you've done is wrong. It's a big deal. In the Enron case, Arthur Andersen was deleting all the evidence off their servers before discovery, and that got them in big trouble. You are required to keep records, and you're required to produce them so that it can be what you've done can be examined in court. Anyway, so in incident response, you prepare to be ready for it. Then you have some way of detecting whether you have an incident, and once you have an incident, something bad is happening on your network, then you contain it to stop it from getting worse. Then you clean up and undo the damage, and then you report on this. Then you recover back to normal functioning and remediate whatever harm has been done. And then you have a post-mortem where you say, all right, what can we learn from this to improve our security procedures so that this won't happen again? That's a proper incident response process. And most companies start with no incident response process, and as they get bigger and more professional, they get better and better at doing all these stages. So this is training, having procedures, having personnel and tools ready to go. Just like you have some plan for in case a building catches fire, you have some plan in case there is a security policy violation, like a virus going through your network. And you'll have a checklist. So first you have to determine whether an incident has occurred. There might just be a server going down because hardware broke, and that's not a violation of security policy, so it's a problem, and you have to fix it, but it's not a security incident. Then you decide whether you really have a security incident, and somebody has the authority to declare an incident and begin incident response processing. And then you contain it so it stops getting worse. You decide how big the problem is, stop the fire from spreading. Then you identify the vulnerabilities that were exploited, clean out the malware, backdoors. This is what the whole world is doing because of SolarWinds. The Russians were in all of our servers for about 9 months without getting caught, so they put innumerable backdoors in tons of servers, and we're in the process now of trying to find all the backdoors. Every company is struggling with this. This will probably take years and probably never really find them all. And then you recover from the incident. Try to return everything back so business can resume, and then you make a follow-up report and have lessons learned meetings to try to improve your company so that this doesn't happen again. So you detect things, often with log files, to decide quickly whether this is a normal problem or whether there really is a security incident. And then you containment, like I say, which may involve disrupting business by turning down servers and such to make sure that you have stopped the incident from getting bigger. And yes, someone asked if Russia is going to further cyber attack us. Yes, certainly. There's been a low-level war going on for more than 10 years. Everybody's attacking everybody all the time. Russia will continue to attack us, both with physical attacks, with spies coming in, and with cyber attacks. We're attacking them, where everybody's attacking Iran and it's attacking back. There's a war going on. Has been for 10 years. There's a book and a lot of podcasts from Nicole Perlroth from the New York Times explaining it in great detail. Jobs for all of us, absolutely. In fact, that's what the That's what's happening 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. That talk from London is about this. Yes, there's a middle of a war going on all around us. Absolutely. Everybody's going to keep hacking everybody into the foreseeable future. Yep, jobs for us. That's a good way to look at it. Anyway, then you have eradication. You determine the cause. Then you can clean up the systems. And you therefore have to really find out the root cause. One of the spectacularly bad incident responses was LinkedIn. I remember LinkedIn got hacked about 8 years ago. And people stole all the password hashes and cracked them. And the ones they couldn't crack, they put on a forum and said, can somebody help me crack these? And then it hit Twitter and the security people started looking, and I went on there and I found my password hash. I cracked it and found my password. And I said, hey, they really did steal LinkedIn passwords. And LinkedIn had an official statement saying, no, that's just fake. They didn't hack us. They tried to hold that posture for like 2 weeks, saying, oh, nothing happened. And everybody like me was saying, dude, they got your passwords. That's my password. They really got your password. Stop lying to us. So then LinkedIn came out and said, we checked with our lawyers, and our lawyer said that we don't really have any personal data that matters. All we have is like just resumes and stuff, and that's not really personal. So our lawyer said we don't have to do anything. So we're not going to do anything about this at all. We're not even going to find out the backdoors and clean them off or make sure they're not still on the network stealing more data. We're just going to do nothing. And I'm like, you can't just do nothing. And then, of course, they eventually decided that's not going to do, and they actually had to pay millions of dollars with lawsuits and stuff, But they tried to just not respond to the incident at all. Yes, yeah, that's right. And people remember this. But anyway, people have reluctantly admitted that you really have to do all this incident response stuff. Of course, at first people tried to say, oh, just shut up. We won't tell anybody and it will be fine. But, it's not that simple. They're not being hacked, just scraped. The information scraped from 500 million LinkedIn. Yeah, well, that's a new one. That was last week. I'm talking about the one from 10 years ago. But yeah, well, if they do just scrape public data, then that is not exactly a breach, right? So if it's true that all they did was scrape the publicly available data, then it might be true that they don't have to do anything about that. But I would question whether it's really true. Then there was Uber. Uber was pretty hilarious. Somebody hacked Uber and threatened to dump the data. And they said, okay, how about we pay the ransom and then we'll call it a bug bounty and not tell anybody and say, oh, that was just a test. And Travis Kalanick tried that. And that didn't fly either. But anyway, all right, so you really have to figure out how they got in so you can kick out the people and know they're out and clean up your system. And then you have to submit reports. You have to have technical reports explaining all the technical details of how they got in and how you can fix it. And then you have to have a non-technical report for your non-technical stakeholders like management, public relations, your customers, your clients. They all need to know, did they get my credit card? Do I need to change my password? Did they move from your systems into my systems and take mine over too? They've got a lot of questions, and you have to have answers for all those questions. And then you recover your systems, and you have to monitor them because it is very common that you think you've resolved the incident, you think you kicked them out, but you haven't because you missed some malware, some backdoors, and they're still in there, and then they start hacking again, and you have to try again. And then there's remediation, where you improve your security posture in a way that prevents this from happening again by switching to two-factor authentication, putting on updates, better firewalls, and whatever you have to do so that at least they can't get in the same way a second time. And then lessons learned. If you're a properly mature company, you will have a post-mortem where you say, all right, let's talk about everything that happened here, talk about our incident response, our detection process, and figure out how to improve all of our processes so we can handle the next incident better. And so root cause analysis is important. You really have to get down to how did they get in, what was the failure of our security controls to get in. I like Cloudflare for this. Cloudflare has had several security incidents at a company, and they have excellent reports. Every time something serious goes wrong, they have a very good write-up within just a few days. Here's exactly what happened. Here's why it happened. Here's what we did to make sure it won't happen again. That is the best you can do. Some people might still believe that you'd want to do business with a company that never gets hacked, But that is not an option. Everybody gets hacked. The NSA, the military, Google, Yahoo, everybody gets hacked. Nobody can achieve that. So the best you can do is be honest. Admit you got hacked. Completely explain what you did, how you fixed it. That's the best thing you can do. Anyway, so let's take a look at these cahoots. This is 7A. We're done with 6. And here's 7A. There we go. All right. Looks like that's it. Oh no. Okay, I'll wait a few more seconds. All right. Now I think we've got everybody. All right. So which one gathers evidence for a lawsuit? Okay, that's EDiscovery. All right, which one is compartmentalization? All right, that's need to know. That's compartmentalization. Not separation of duties, but need to know, making sure that you don't have information you don't need and therefore you can't leak it out. All right, which one requires personnel to keep secrets? Okay, that's non-disclosure agreement. Good. This is why Snowden got in trouble. I mean, he totally signed an agreement and then he totally leaked the secrets. That's why his lawyer said, my recommendation for you is stay in Russia. Don't ever come back. I don't want to defend you because you're toast. Anyway. All right, writing IR policies. What's that? Yep, that's preparing. Good. All right, and which process has to include a non-technical explanation? Reporting, of course, this is a big theme of the CISSP. To be helpful to your company, you can't just spit out complicated code and binary. You have to boil it down to actionable business intelligence in plain English so management can understand it and talk about it without the technical details. All right. All right, and which process includes submitting a final report. Yeah, that's the postmortem. This reporting here is more like a progress report while the instant response is happening, but it's only after it's all over, including the postmortem, that you're ready for a final report saying we're now done with this, we've finished everything. All right. All right. All right.